All right, how's it going? I normally do a podcast live, but I got to tell you, we did a SciTech conference the other day. It was an amazing conversation with Tyler Bryden, James Stevens, Sarah Hashkes, and I just thought more of the world needs to hear this. Thanks to the SciTech people, they've licensed this over to us here for the High Times podcast. It's really quite special. Please have a listen to a talk we had at a virtual conference just the other day. I really think you're going to enjoy it. We appreciate High Times, powered by Red Light Holland, of course. Have a listen. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, tonight. I am very excited to have you all here for SciTech's webinar on the future of psychedelics and the impact of technology. I'm very, very thrilled and honored to have our host for tonight, Todd Shapiro. He is the CEO of Red Light Holland and a very renowned radio talk show host. Todd will be moderating tonight. I'm not going to take up any time. Thanks for coming tonight, Todd, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. We really appreciate being here, all of us. I know we're very excited for the SciTech event here in this wonderful chat, and a chat that I'm personally really excited to learn about as well. We have some incredible experts that I'm going to bring on now, and we appreciate everybody at home or wherever they are on their cell phones or their computers watching this and being informed by these great experts who I'm going to bring on. So let's start with Sarah Hashkes, and Sarah is the CEO of Radix Motion. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. I would like to start us out with 60 seconds of what psychedelics do to the brain, so we're at least have the same knowledge. So I'm going to share my screen. So when we're talking about psychedelics, we're talking about chemicals that actually connect to the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor and make the neurons that have these receptors more likely to fire. But what does it mean on a system-wide level? What is actually happening in the brain? So for that, I'd like to imagine that what your brain is constantly doing is actually building sand castles. Imagine all the incoming information from your senses, your eyesight, your hearing, your smell is actually sand. And the sand is constantly coming in, and the other part of your brain is comprised of buckets that are actually in cognitive neuroscience lingo called biases or priors or predictions. And these buckets are constantly trying to take the sand and make shapes out of it. And this is actually the process in which you're creating your perception. Perception is actually a creative process, which is really interesting. Now, psychedelics actually cause these buckets that you have to break down into smaller buckets and different sized buckets. And the side effect of that is an overwhelming amount of sand that isn't being put into buckets. Now, there's two things that are important. One is that the sand, even in a usual process, can slowly update and change the buckets. There's this feedback loop that happens. And the second is that this really explains why under psychedelics, we have new options, new possibilities emerge from our brain. We don't need to be connected so much to the past trauma that we have experienced or to our past beliefs. And so this is sort of really important when we start talking about the combination of technology and psychedelics. We don't really know how to break these buckets down using any other current available technology, but we can, with immersive technology, actually create a state which has higher prediction error or more sand in your brain by starting to play with the statistics of different incoming sensory inputs. And we'll talk about that more later. And get back to you is because we do not yet know how to actually break down these buckets, not with chemicals, but we do know how to actually increase the sand, increase the prediction error with many different technological capabilities that we have. So when we're starting to talk about the intersection of psychedelics and technology, this is a very important distinction to make, and to also start talking about how can we create similar effects of psychedelics with current technology. And we can get into that later, but thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that brief introduction and helping set the stage here on why this chat will be so important and so informative. Please also welcome James Stevens, and James is the Chief Scientific Officer of Aurelius Data. Hey, James.
How's it going? So I think the role that Aurelius Data and where I play in this whole process is actually the next step after Sarah's, where we talk about these buckets and these sand. Really what we focus on is gathering perception data in and work on building products and systems that form rituals that actually help shape the bias to have a more likely outcome on a safe or effectual psychedelic experience. So when you're talking about gathering data from people and bringing that information in, you know, shamans traditionally do rituals, you do cleansing exercises, you do all this stuff before you experience a psychedelic event in traditional indigenous medicine or whatever. Really gathering all the data from everyone's perceptions and being able to create a bias structure that creates a positive outcome, whether that's for depression, whether that's for not having a bad trip, it doesn't really matter. That's where data and product building and formulation can all come together from everything that we're talking about to increase the likelihood of a positive experience from the event.
Well, thank you, James, for that brief intro and tying a nice little segue onto Sarah's quick intro as well, which leads us to our third presenter here. A third presenter, just, you know, individual who we're having a nice conversation with. Please welcome Tyler Brydon. Tyler is the founder of Speak AI. Tyler, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I've been watching all these webinars, and to be up here is sort of a surreal experience. So I'm very fascinated right now in sort of what's called multimodal analysis. So how can we understand people based off the way that they're speaking, the way that they're delivering information to each other when they're communicating? And what I'm really trying to understand is how can we understand the changes that people are going through as they have psychedelic experiences, and once they actually have those experiences, how can we let them live a life that's more purposeful and fulfilling? So very excited to be part of this discussion today, and thank you again for having me, SciTech.
So what I'd like to say, just to sort of do an official start here, is full disclosure on what I do as a CEO of a publicly traded company called Red Light Holland, but also the fact that I'm only really 2 years into truly understanding psychedelics. Some anecdotally, some through a lot of research, and that comes from my media background. And I know that there's sometimes some of the pioneers and advocates and scientists and medical research that goes into this, and data plays, big data plays, that sort of always want to see, can we merge these worlds of corporate, of publicly traded companies, of advocates, of pioneers, and of medical and research. And when I say about full disclosure, I'm really those 2 years in and learning so much. And the one thing that I really believe wholeheartedly, without making medical claims yet, about psychedelics in general, and I'll say psilocybin more in my case, is that I really believe that there will be properties that we can prove out to help human beings, and the fact that it is a purpose drug and a no ego drug. And what I would like to see, and what I like to hope, especially with these types of conferences, which I'm so grateful to be a part of, is the fact that we can merge all our worlds and merge them in a way that really is for working together as opposed to against each other. And what I'm really getting at is I'd love to learn first, before we get into technology, into privacy and data and stuff, is where did you how did you get into this industry as a start here? James, let's start with you. How long have you been doing this? Why is psychedelic so important to you?
So really, all my work starts back to doing stuff, honestly, for performance-enhancing compounds for pharmaceutical companies back in the early 2000s. Really kind of related to what improves performance, whether it's cognitive performance or reduction in stress, reduction of wherever. And then I got into the natural products industry about 2008, 2009 with a company I had founded and then sold off recently, really developing natural and sustainable ingredients and products for stuff. And really what it came down to is I started realizing everything needs to be consumer centric. And really that started incorporating indigenous ideas into development, looking at new ways to get inspiration, be that biomimicry, being that traditional knowledge. My dad was always a big kind of reader of things like Carlos Castaneda and stuff like that. So I was exposed to that, in my early childhood, weirdly enough, not necessarily the psychedelic aspect, but the reading those works. And really that got me into this whole aspect of believing that there's a lot of knowledge out there that Western constructs, Western religion had kind of suppressed for a variety of reasons. And I got really interested in how you develop products with that. And that led into that. And then that made me realize that the vast majority of, I guess, what they traditionally call left-handed religions or non-Western religions have some kind of ritual or purpose that brings a psychedelic experience. And so that can be anywhere from fasting on the top of a mountain where you don't drink water or eat food for 3 days and you have a psychedelic experience. That can come to sweat lodges that get to 160 degrees and you start hallucinating during that whole process. It doesn't really matter whether it's chemical or a physiochemical response from that. There's lots of ways, and almost all other kind of religions at least espouse this kind of alternative changing your mindset, resetting yourself, recalibrating, doing something that changes your perception of reality. And that got me interested in the whole space, and honestly, how to develop a safe experience for people. Having sat on top of a mountaintop and fasted for 3 days and realizing that that's not a safe experience, or being in a hot sweat lodge and kind of going through that whole process, there's a lot of these that aren't safe. And so figuring out how to make these experiences safe for the average person is one that really got me interested in how do we use data, how do we develop products, how do we develop, I guess, lack of better term, supporting therapies or supportive products to this before you go into those experiences.
Well said, and ultimately responsible use is, I think, something that everybody is behind. Tyler, why don't you give us a little background on sort of how long you've been involved within the psychedelic sector?
Yeah, and thank you again for the opportunity. I would actually trace this back a little bit to 2012, where I was actually, in a former life, I was a competitive hockey player. And when that time ends in your life, you either make it or you don't make it. And I didn't make it, and just felt a lot of purposeless and meaningless in my life. And my dad had also struggled with alcoholism, and 3 adverse childhood events can really have some ramifications down the road. And so at 21, actually with the use of psilocybin mushrooms, actually part of it, I really ended up in sort of a dark place in my life, and I just didn't understand a lot of the important parts that we all know is so clear to us right now about dosage and setting and all this, all these important things that are integral to actually having a positive experience. And so at 21, my dad had a heart attack and he lived, but all these revelations and breakthroughs were coming. And at the time, there was so much stigma around this stuff that I didn't really know who to communicate to, and really ended up pretty isolated. And I ended up as an inpatient in the hospital. And what became clear to me, even though I'm in Canada and we have an amazing mental health care system and everyone, cares so deeply about the work that they're doing, we still have a lot of shortcomings. And the responsibility of self-healing sort of became very, very clear to me. And during that time, I was doing a lot of, I was trying to figure out how can I get to a better place. And so I was journaling, I was writing text notes, audio notes, video notes. And at the time they felt really meaningful to me. But when I went back and looked at them, they were sort of like they're chicken scratch. I didn't really understand what I was talking about. And so what I tried to do and conceptualize since 2012 and 2013 was a system that I could sort of basically document journals and entries and things into myself and actually get insights back. And so that's a big quest of mine, and very, very much from a personal journey, and just seeing the power of sort of journaling for well-being. And, that's led to some amazing opportunities and things like this. So I'm very, very grateful. And thank you. Thank you, Todd.
Well, and thank you for being so candid. I think that's another important sort of aspect to this sector is the openness and candidness of people's anecdotal experiences and going deep and sort of dark in a way to sort of some of their past experience as well, and opening up about that, because this is where we all want to be, which is a place of helping others, but it has to start within. So thank you, Tyler, for that full disclosure. Sarah, you come from a very interesting, and I've studied a little bit about you, but I want you to explain it, because you're very deep into the psychedelic sector and studies, and really a very big brain when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And I'd love for you to sort of share your background.
Yeah, thanks. So actually, my first altered state of consciousness experience come from movement practice. I'm a martial artist. I've been training since I was a kid. And you can get your brains into very interesting states with enough training, with Japanese masters running you up and down hills in the snow. And I was exposed to any type of substances actually quite late in life. And it blew my mind away, literally, and my personal experience was just transformed. And I was so fascinated by it that I just needed to know what was going on. And I was on my way already to study cognitive neuroscience from a master program in the Netherlands, where their drug policies make it much safer to actually at least self-experiment on yourself, as all the substances are decriminalized. And I wrote the first academic paper about what psychedelics do to the brain within this predictive coding framework that I highly recommend any brain read about a little bit. There's a few really good resources. A book by Andy Clark called Surfing Uncertainty is one of the best sort of non-academic books that still really dives deep into your brain as a prediction machine. And within this framework, again, examining a bunch of research and working closely with a math professor, we came up with this a theory that I sort of showed with the buckets and sand, of course, with a lot more math and science words. And from that, it became very hard to actually get data, right? It still takes a lot of approval to get actual psychedelic research and apply it to people. So I pivoted my research into immersive technology because I could get some of those types of experiences, some amount of ego loss, some amount of synesthesia, by manipulating the incoming sources of data that I can give to brains. By changing the correlation, the statistical correlations between what we see and our own body image, I can start doing very, very trippy things to brains with, for better or worse, almost zero bureaucracy. In academia, it's like a behavioral experiment like any other. In some ways, they don't even understand yet how strong and powerful things like virtual reality can be. That's what I came out of my master's program, wanting to take all this knowledge to things that actually affect things outside of academia. Academia, is amazing to pursue research, but so much of it gets stuck inside of academia, while so much is happening in the outside world. And that's what I've been doing. I have a company called Radix Motion. We're trying to hack the brain-body connection between ourselves and others using immersive technology. And we have the first messenger that lets people send actually 3D movements along with psychedelic filters, which means that your movements get connected actually to synesthesia algorithms based on the types of filters you choose. And you can sort of morph your size, and you can actually walk inside of another person's body. We do all these really cool experiments if people want to join. Last week we had a professional juggler, which we could then walk inside of their body and juggle with inside of a professional mover. So there's massive potential of enhancing our learning and capabilities and empathy, right? Being actually connected to your family and friends in these deeper ways. That I think almost everybody that does psychedelics in what we're calling a positive setting with friends and people that are close, we feel that merger and ego sort of expansion sometimes into this whole group consciousness, and we can get similar effects with technology. So that's really where the intersection is for me.
Sarah, you mentioned that there was at times sort of some hurdles to collect data. Yep. And I asked this question in 2020 because I think it's still a very relevant question for all the viewers listening. What should they know really, and this is for anyone on the panel, about data and privacy? I mean, it sounds basic, but really, what should people know about data and privacy?
They should know that things are not very well out there right now. Unfortunately, most companies are not incentivized to actually care about their end users, right? They care about the shareholders and making more money. And this is part of the reason that I really decided to open my own company in hopes to try to change that. We're actually crowdfunding right now because we want the owners of our company to be the users. We want to find these alignments. And there's no way for these alignments to happen unless they're actually there, unless the structure of your company is aligned with the user's well-being. And the data that we're starting to be able to get, and I think Tyler can speak about that too, like all of us probably is massive, right? The fact that I'm able to collect movement data, we're the first company that's really based on this new type of data from people, your body posture, how you move, how jittery you are. There's massive potential in, treating and early detection of health issues and helping giving you feedback about your concentration. So there's massive positive abilities to utilize any type of data. But there's also massive potential for this to go very dystopian, right? And to try to sell you things when you're sad, because that's when you buy things more. And this is really what I think every startup creator, every engineer, every person who is in this ecosystem should start really thinking about how they contribute to this ecosystem and how we can align incentives so that the data is used for the benefit of the end user.
James, Sarah's using VR, which is a really interesting way to collect data. What do you think are some other trends in technology that will have an impact on work being done in the psychedelic sector?
I think, we always joke everyone lies when they fill out a survey or whatever. So anything that can effectively deploy truth-telling technology so we can actually jive the actual experience, not with what someone tells us, but with what's really occurring. So voice recognition, optical absorption, gait analysis, eye pupil analysis, temperature analysis. Your Apple Watch records huge amounts of data on you, all that kind of stuff. I think what we really have to do is jive how we can get huge amounts of data sets to actually tell us the truth versus what people tell us what's going on, right? And that's the biggest problem with pharmaceuticals, with perception, with mood, with whatever. Effectively, especially Western culture, and I'll say kind of Western white male U.S. culture, is you don't express your emotions. You aren't ever sad. You're not ever stressed out. You're supposed to be the stoic rock in a thing. And so, from childhood, you've kind of been trained to be stoic, and so you need to get all this technology and all this information from motion to voice capture to whatever to actually tell the truth, because we need the truth to figure out where it's at. And again, when I go back to safety or whatever, when it comes to psychedelics or any kind of athenogenic material where the kind of perception and use is unique to each individual, we have to be able to tell the truth of what's going on so we can determine how to use it safely and how to do it that way versus what's going to cause a negative effect, whether that's increased heart rate and increase of stroke, or you're going to have a bad psychological thing, or it resets your brain in a way that's not good, all that kind of stuff. We need the truth, and the only way to do that is to actually gather all those sub kind of conscious cues and utilize that in a data analysis system.
Tyler, do psychedelics, in your opinion, make it easier for people to tell the truth when it comes to companies collecting their data?
Oh, that's a very fascinating question. I don't think we've seen instances of LSD in the past being used for sort of a truth serum. I don't know about that, but the piece there is that we tap into sort of a stream of consciousness that might be more us, or some people might think is not us. And in those altered states, there's a lot of things that can come through that might not be there in sort of a non-altered state. So I think that's something really fascinating that is worth exploring. I want to quickly, I'd love to just share the screen here just so I can show a couple trends that I'm seeing and maybe just touch on this, because I think this is really important, and this is going to affect the risks of technology. This is some of the things that I'm actually seeing. And these are really, I don't like to be the person who's like, we have to consider this, but as someone who's spent some time obviously on the back end of stuff, and one sec, I guess
second, when you screen share, it's causing sound.
Okay.
So we're gonna stop screen sharing.
Okay, no worries. So I'll stop the screen sharing there. The piece that I guess I wanted to touch on there is a lot of things that are actually people who are building the tech, we don't actually have access to how they're building that tech. So there's a lot of black boxes in what's actually going on. We're all using phones, we're all using devices, and we're not actually sure, how some of these things are working. So as people who are users of technology, I think that's something that we need to consider. And then just lastly, that part that you asked, Todd, is like, if it's trying to understand, if I'm telling the truth or not, how accurate are we actually doing that? And if we're trying to make decisions based off inaccurate information, that can be a really dangerous place that we actually sit. So just a couple points that I think are really worth it. And then one last thing is just how much identifying information is in voice, is within our face, and just our digital data in general, whether that's location, whether that's browsing history, or just the way that we're talking and looking. So yeah.
And listen, it's interesting because a lot of people have these types of questions where, wait a second, I was just talking about I need a new bed, and then a Casper mattress ad popped up on my Instagram feed. So, we have these sort of internal fears now of like, are people listening? Are these apps listening? We heard that the iWatch is listening. And is there a way for the psychedelic sector, though, to be transparent to individuals who are signing up to their privacy policies, to carefully read through them and say, hey, listen, we assure the end user, and Sarah, you alluded to this, that we are using this data for good. We are using this to help prove out these studies and anecdotal studies to help with depression, with anxiety, with mental health issues, saving lives. Is there a way to make that clear to end consumers?
So what we're doing is, first of all, we're having an open discussion with our users. Why should it be just us deciding these things, right? What do you want this data to be with, to do? This is your data. And getting really, as we start building this API that can also transform. The reason I left academia is I was doing research on 13 psychology students. And with the platform that I'm building right now, we already have more than 1,500 users that are on it and trying it. So I can create experiments that are much wider spread and get actually much wider data. But we are gonna make sure that people sign on explicitly. Consent is a very strong flag in my belief system, and getting enthusiastic consent of people that are saying, yes, we are joining in for this, and can even, get things back. What do they get for this? Are they monetizing their own data? Are they getting, access to the newest research? Are they getting access to new features? So this is really about creating a consentful connection between companies and their end users. And we're so used to the ad model, the advertisement model. We're so used to it in some ways, but it doesn't have to be this way. And I think this is the magic of psychedelics, is that they break down our biases and tell us it doesn't have to be this way. So we can try to think creatively as people in tech to change these things.
I completely concur in the optimism and the compassion and empathy in that response. And it's one that, quite frankly, I want to be a part of too in growing this sector with what we're doing. But not to sound like a downer, James, are there risks to consider when we're using technology to try and help improve therapy?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you don't think that governments around the world don't have backdoor relationships with every major corporation and either demand through warrants or whatever to get access to this information to break up, drug smuggling, cartels, all this kind of thing that they're working with, the only way to really get privacy or do that is to really start forcing advocacy, as much as you see with other movements right now, among your governments. Like, right, honestly, what the EU did with the GDRP and all that kind of stuff is an interesting step in the right direction, in my opinion. And I think it's the only way to really do it, because I can tell you most governmental organizations are going to take what they need to accomplish whatever they think their goal is. And the only thing for that to do is for, people that, give consent to the government to actually figure out how to remove consent and get laws passed or policies or whatever in place, and honestly effectively figure out how to police both corporations and the government through, honestly, I think legislation. And I think the legislation is the only way to at least protect yourself from unintended consequences from it. Because, a company can have all the best, intentions in the world, and then they can get a warrant from the NSA in the United States, or get a warrant from, anyone in the UK or a government agency, and all of a sudden they have to turn over all their data.
So I'd like to put, I have very strong issues with the word have to. I think each of us constantly has a choice. And there's costs, right? Companies can say no and fight these things and go to court, or they can comply with Chinese whatever, and give in and not care about their end users. And I'm really hoping that we see, as society shifts in the last few months, people start realizing their personal responsibility, and move into a thing that's willing to take more risk upon themselves and not necessarily comply to whatever order comes.
I find an interesting kind of anecdotal effect is the more people become empathetic and open up their worldview, the less effectual they have in affecting change. And that's my own personal opinion on this. But what I've seen is a lot of people who become more empathetic have a harder time, engaging in resistance, except for certain types of resistance, right? And so, it's an interesting dichotomy as you open up your mind space and become more accepting of what's going on in the universe and have a different viewpoint and whatever from there. Those locked in dogmatic ideologies allow things to occur in other ways and allow people to advocate and force and protest and do whatever. And so there's this interesting juxtaposition that I haven't even completely jived in my brain, because through interviews, through talking, through doing trials with people, I've noticed as people kind of open up their minds, they have a lot more trouble, getting out there and marching and advocating for, generic things. And that's just my own personal observation, but I find it interesting because awareness also kind of increases acceptance. And I've noticed that especially among veterans groups with high levels of PTSD, as they use psychedelics, they can become much more accepting and kind of seem healthier or happier, but they're also much more willing to just kind of be like, this is what the world's doing and this is the universe. And, I tried to be part of the system. So I find that an interesting kind of weird juxtaposition. As we encourage awareness, there could be unintended consequences of it as well, too.
Well, and James, I would add to that, where again, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, with the empathy. It's also the access to information, and people are kind of being more open themselves from what I'm seeing, and then they're learning themselves. So when we think about big pharma and we think about what big pharma is doing, not only with, I think a lot of people are really fearing, from the opioid crisis to the benzo addictions to them even collecting our data that way anyway. Why not perhaps get behind a movement where you can learn about it, speak to people, learn and help each other while saying, listen, if there's going to be something given to us on this planet, let's maybe try to take advantage of it here. And back to what you said about the big sort of social movements, and it's something I've kind of been saying for about a year or year and a half now. I really believe, and again, I believe this, I hope it doesn't sound self-serving here as a CEO of a company that's publicly traded, but I believe that there's going to be a big wave of movement of protest against companies that are doing the big pharma drugs that aren't working for treatments of depression and anxiety and et cetera. And of course, the addictions that come with that, and a lot of admitted addictions. We've seen companies that have had to pay billions of dollars if they could afford it and not declare bankruptcy to give back to those whose lives they've actually cost. And I think there is going to be a big movement to say, hey, can we explore this type of experience further to help us? Tyler, what do you think of that? Do you think that there could be a big movement here?
Well, just to touch on that, one of the things I'm really interested that we're seeing with the rise of machine learning and artificial intelligence is just predictive technology, right? So we're trying to actually predict things before they happen. And we enter this really, really weird minority state report where, and I've got a fire alarm going on in the back. So that is
of course.
Tap me out for a second. I'll come back when this
They're coming to get you. Sarah, why don't you jump in here if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, so I actually thought James was saying some very interesting things. And it brings us to a point of talking about, right, what psychedelics do, their capabilities, the plasticity of the brain, right? And it is so dependent on the setting that you're in. And definitely having this experience of acceptance versus understanding yourself as an agent of change, that's a really interesting dimension to think about when we're trying to heal ourselves, our trauma, people's PTSD. And what you're saying, I agree with, actually, James. I've seen this too, and it's somewhat worrying to me. There is a level of acceptance that causes compliance, right? And how do we not do that? How can we accept our previous pain and take it into making sure that other people don't receive that pain in the future, right? So this is a very interesting point you're actually bringing up. I just wanted to mention that. Yeah.
And it's been a very interesting cultural dynamic when you study a lot of indigenous cultures, right? You know, especially for young males, you move from this time in your life where you kind of have a warrior mentality, a change mentality, or whatever. And traditionally, those cultures don't give those individuals psychedelics or mind changing events. And then as they mature and get older, you effectively will take a psychedelic or have a life changing experience, right? And then you'll transition into an elder state, right? So when you look at, you know, you look at South America, Latin America, you look at Africa, you look at some stuff in Asia, you look at traditional kind of indigenous Celtic and Norwegian cultures and what they did. So most of the stuff to gear someone up to be in kind of a warrior state or an active change mind state are incredibly painful events, right? So I think about fasting on a mountaintop for 3 days. That's not a pleasant experience. The sun's baking on you, you're freezing at night, you're doing this, it's gearing your body up to almost be hard and like train like martial arts, like you're talking about, right? And then as you transition to psychedelics that change your awareness and your state, it's almost like this transition from, you know, I guess soldier or, you know, member of society into someone who's going to be a leader in society. And that's how I started seeing it and looking, you know, and studying a lot of indigenous traditions, you know, whether it didn't matter whether it was Northern European or African or Asian or Middle Eastern or South American. There's really these kind of states in time in life that they adjust through. And I think, you know, it was an interesting theory on when do you get people in the right state of mind and when do you need it and how do you do that? And can you use it the reverse, right? If you need older people to be advocates, do you expose them to that kind of situation or psychedelic change, right? So even if it's a physical psychedelic change or whatever, where you change their mind state, can you take a bunch of old people who are maybe innately, you know, biased or whatever and put them into a state where you can open up their mind and then get them in an advocacy role? Again, that goes back to using data and potentially mental manipulation and all the stuff everyone's worried about. But these different mind states and different kind of roles in time and period are really interesting from studying historical, classical kind of use of psychedelics or physical experiences to change mind state.
Are there ways, and I'm going to give a simple analogy here. Sometimes people have trouble performing and speaking about something they know when there's a camera on them because they're conscious of, you know, their way they're looking. They're worried about maybe, you know, people are judging them for things they're not saying, but just based on appearance, et cetera. So you're conscious of that. Are there ways to do trials to bring information out of psychedelics to collect data where people aren't compromised or aren't necessarily acting knowing that that data is being collected? Is there a way to make it an authentic experience?
I think I can let other people answer. My thought is there's two ways to do this. And one is probably gamification where you make it fun. And then the other one is ego death. I mean, which we can talk about all day long. I think the moment someone experiences ego death, you're worrying about what someone else thinks about you. And my experience goes completely away.
So the measurement problem is real. You know, it goes down even to like the quantum level. When we measure things, we affect them. And that's just, we need to find ways to work around this and understand the limitations of our experiments. And you can create experiments in more naturalistic settings. Users in my experiments, they, even though, you know, people know it's not real, their body acts very much as if it is. So there's different components that you can still get out of experiments, even if they are not, even if the measurement problem is real, but it's a very real problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to add just, you know, if the fire alarm does not go off, that, you know, for example, MAPS is doing all their clinical studies right now, and they are recording those sessions for adherence and making sure that they're compliant with how everything is actually done. So there's an interface with technology right there. And the question I've wondered, oh my God, is, you know, how is that actually impacting the experience? So I think there is a true piece there of measurement does actually change the actual experience.
Thanks, Tyler. It just sounds like a truck's backing up. Don't worry too much, okay? It's actually not that bad on our end. It's interesting for individuals who are learning about the psychedelic sector in general on a very sort of basic level, and I don't mean to make that sound insulting at all. They'll come up to me, for example, it's like, oh my goodness, I saw Gwyneth Paltrow do the Goop Lab, and they recorded that guided therapy and stuff. Is that dangerous that people only learn about it through that way? And based on that, you know, this is an experience for TV that's maybe Hollywoodized and shown to glorify or maybe, you know, just really highlight things that aren't the true purpose of the drug. Is that, I mean, a relevant question, Sarah?
I think so, yes. That's why I started with the science, right? And I don't know, I heard we had maybe some voice issues, but definitely I recommend everybody have a basic understanding of what is going on actually with this substance. There's been a lot of data we've learned over the last few years, and it's you don't need to go necessarily very deep or understand chemistry and the whole neuroscience, but to understand a little bit the mechanism of which your brain works and how these substances actually affect them is incredibly important in order to prevent things like manipulation by possible big pharma coming into this, or Hollywood, or any of these very powerful meme structures that might be wanting to affect how we perceive and what we think of something. So having an actual scientific-based model is incredibly important.
I think I come at this from a biological perspective, and so I always equate using any kind of mind-altering chemical to skydiving, right? You're intentionally taking a compound that an organism produces to keep other organisms from eating it, right? Whether it's psilocybin in a mushroom, whether it's ergotamine, LSD, an ergot fungus, whether you lick a toad. Most of these are biological defense mechanisms, and they've evolved to do something to you to make you maybe not want to do it. Humans are unique, and some dolphins and some organisms like that eat pufferfish to get high and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? But I always equate it to skydiving because yes, it's a life-changing experience. You can do all sorts of things. I've done a halo jump, right? Completely life-changing. Also, your chance of screwing up all of your software in your brain or potentially your hardware exists if the situation's not right. So there are inherent risks to using any of those materials, but there's inherent risk to taking aspirin too, right? Like you could have an ulcer and bleed out. I mean, it is what it is. So just understanding those risks, I think, are the most important thing to anybody involved in this. Is these are unique materials that do unique things to your brain, and they're individual to every person that appears for these materials. So there's risk to taking them.
Yeah, I mean, there's risk to taking any over-the-counter medication, from Benadryl to Tylenol, if it was sort of experienced in college and was told to you to only take it, in crazy dosages for the night of your life. And it's sort of like a learned behavior on how people look at psychedelics. Can technology help end that stigma?
So we're actually getting a question in the chat about the dangers of even simulating altered states with virtual reality, right? And I think these dangers are very real because, like I explained, virtual reality and immersive technology can actually simulate very similar states. And one of the things we really need to do with combining technology and these altered states is, again, collecting data. Collecting data on short-term use, long-term use. These are things we don't actually really know yet. And people, we do know enough already to know that there are potential massive benefits, especially for short-term use. We can see this in virtual reality with treatment of anorexia and PTSD. Similar with psychedelics, we're seeing amazing results with people that were just treatment resistant for anything else. So I think, from my perspective, the risk is worth it, right? We can't let fear stop us from exploring this amazing opportunity for change. And where technology comes in is really like the data. We need to start actually collecting larger sets and understanding what's going on and how to mitigate the risk.
James, are you familiar with any of the leading technology companies right now, inside and really outside of the psychedelic space, that you see as having an impact on this future?
I'll use the one that everyone talks about that's so Minority Report, right? Like, all of a sudden, Palantir, right? The Peter Thiel's company that he's funded, doing pre-crime work in New Orleans, all this kind of stuff. So when we're looking at data and predictive behavior and whatever, I think one of the things that I'm always kind of interested out there in the technology is, the introduction of psychedelics and gathering that data will allow you to potentially figure out how to best fit and start modeling outlier data points, right? When you scramble the brain and scramble the signals and everything changes and your reality state changes, gathering those responses to that, especially on a mass scale of millions of users, will allow the data to predict behavior and do a lot of this stuff to get better, because then you can start capturing outlier data. The biggest problem with a lot of crime prediction or whatever like that really is the fact that some of it is just a mental health issue and it creates an outlier event, right? You know, a psychotic break, something like that, where all of a sudden the brain chemistry doesn't occur like as predicted, which then creates to unpredictable behavior, which then makes it impossible to predict or figure out how to make sure people don't enter those states. That's where it's going to go. But those companies doing big data on behavioral analysis, those are the ones that I think are the ones that are doing cutting edge work, but also using it effectively in a dystopian potential mechanism too.
Sarah, would you like to add to that? I see you sort of nodding in approval as well.
I mean, no, I agree with everything being said. And again, I hope my company's still very small. We're very early on, but my hope is for us to become a data source for researchers wanting to explore psychedelic or altered states of conscious states that are a bit safer, because we're not actually introducing chemicals. They are still powerful. They can still really shift a person's behavior, but being able to put a person in a synesthetic state and seeing their physical responses without actually administering any drug, and then knowing, well, okay, based on this predictive model, this person might actually be an outlier that has a higher likelihood of getting some negative effect versus, oh, this is a use case that would actually fit very well for treatment. So there's massive potential in that ability.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually safe here right now. So I just love to add that one of the companies that I've had my eye on, they just raised $100 million USD, is Mindstrong, and one of the things that they're looking at here is sort of like active data collection versus passive data collection. And what's happening is, for example, with a ketamine treatment, they're trying to do a better job, sort of doing mood monitoring on their patient. But if you have treatment-resistant depression and you're at a really dark point in your life, it's really hard to get you to actually comply. For example, recording journals or recording notes or even responding to texts and calls. So what Mindstrong is actually trying to do is much more passive data collection, where they're actually using how you're interacting with your phone in terms of like 24/7 monitoring. So there's massive potential to not disrupt someone's normal life and get important data, but look at the risks of actually doing that as well too, of having that system on your phone. I think there's a couple companies that are going to come and look at the psychedelic space in general as it sort of emerges and becomes more accessible, who are very well prepared for mental health in general right now, who will be a direct slide into the industry that is growing with psychedelics. And I think there's a couple companies, Maya Health is one of them here, focused specifically on psychedelics and really trying to anonymize data, but sort of group it together. And then just one like Osmind, which just got into Y Combinator, which is another organization. And that's a validation that, for example, Y Combinator, a tech incubator and accelerator, is investing in this technology, and a big part of the data collection piece there as well too. I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see.
Very interesting, Tyler. Are there unconventional ways, and maybe Sarah, yours is an unconventional way of sort of collecting data and technology in the psychedelic sector? Are there other unconventional ways?
I mean, I love what Sarah's doing. I think, unconventionally, that's a beautiful way to look at it. The way that I've been trying to approach it has been through this sort of journaling methodology and constant documentation, monitoring yourself and self-analysis. And that surfaced some, invaluable insights into my own life and now some of the people who are using the system. But, there's a lot of gaps here. And, say you record a journal, but you record that for, 15 minutes of your day. That's not maybe an accurate snapshot of actually what's going on in your life. And if anyone's gone through sort of like, mood monitoring setup, I went through this when I was, really struggling with what I was going through. And what did they give me? They gave me a paper sheet that was 1 to 100, and you wrote an X on how you felt that day. That's not representative of my mood, of what I'm going through and what many people are going through. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done of how we can collect that data more continuously, but also, again, safely, considering how vulnerable some people are in these states, whether mental health or using psychedelics, and having these big breakthroughs.
I think trying to hack the visual system, right? Our visual system is a bit like the graphics card of our computer. It's incredibly powerful. And what Tyler's sort of explaining, showing an X over how you feel is just like, that's putting me in a depressed mood to begin with, because there's so much more that's going on. And our ability to utilize what even internally, so many of these meditations are about seeing or visualizing. And once your own visual system actually gets access to these modules that are in pain or experiencing a depressed state, the updating and understanding of your whole system can start to happen. And if we can find ways, that's sort of the origin of my dream. How can we share these visualizations, these dream states that we experience with our community, with our therapists? If somebody could just see what I'm experiencing and be in my state, that would just offer so much ability of insight and help for me. And that's, the best way I can currently find. And I went from lab to lab in university, and there's a lot of very interesting tech out there, not consumer based, right? I can TDSC, like electrocute your brain, create magnetic pulses to shut down parts of your brain, but none of these are going to be actually consumer devices, despite some things that are out there right now, including what we're talking about, like biofeedback, EEG. A lot of these consumer devices, unfortunately, are just noise. So very different if you're going to an actual therapy session, gluing electrodes on your head for an hour, getting that accurate data versus just being at home. But getting access to these biological data, and we're talking, right, James said before, even your heartbeat, things like that can start offering this insight into what's going on inside of you, even to yourself.
Well, and I think from a tech perspective, the physiological data is really hard to lie about. Your heart rate, your skin temperature, what you're experiencing. Yeah. And I think one dynamic that's kind of overlooked, but I came out of flavor and fragrance work. So it's always on my mind is I do a lot of work with compounds that influence the trigeminal nerve, right? To make you feel something, tingling, heat, cooling, whatever. And a lot of that can be used not only recording the data to get how people are interfering with psychedelics, but combined with like Sarah's technology and all the stuff we're talking about, we can go back into starting to induce, like if you want someone to be in a warm environment, we can make them feel warm. If you want them to think they're in a forest, we can actually do the scents and the smells of the dirt and all of this stuff. And creating an immersive environment that mimics a psychedelic experience is going to be really, really easy as we start considering all the senses, right? The tactile senses, smell, taste, what triggers trigeminal nerve. We can literally put compounds in your food that make you feel fear or make you feel calm because of how they trigger those nervous systems and do all this kind of stuff. Like all those techniques that are used to honestly make Doritos taste amazing, and make you love them can also be used in the psychedelic space to create these simulated environments that get you close to it without maybe having to experience a drug interaction.
So James, for in my case here as the CEO of a company in the Netherlands that's building out a recreational side and a medical and scientific division, with technology, where do you see us, not me as the company, but the sector as a whole being in terms of, will the technology help legal and recreational use across this world quicker, or medical and pharmaceutical use faster?
I think this is going to sound probably contrarian, but I think acknowledging the recreational side, a lot of what's going on, and pushing that, I think there's more acceptance. People accept alcohol pretty much worldwide, except for Muslim countries, right? As a compound that like you can use, and it relaxes you, it does stuff, it alters your mental state, and it's used consistently. Caffeine's used for performance enhancing compounds. Nicotine is still fairly accepted in the EU compared to the US. From there, I think honestly the recreational side of things is actually probably the back door to get mass acceptance of these materials, but you're still going to have to demonstrate some level of safety, because that's what cannabis is running up against right now, is no matter how safe we prove it, everyone's like, oh, it's dangerous and it's going to make you go crazy and it's going to increase schizophrenia and do all this kind of stuff. Whether it's true or not is completely irrelevant. That's perception's reality. And so being able to force this down a recreational pathway, I think has an opportunity. I'll also be selfish there. The recreational pathway does kind of block pharma from taking over the space, and it creates the opportunity for small micro distillers, niche producers, whatever, of various products. So, from a selfish perspective, the recreational side of things does create an opportunity for small business to thrive, where otherwise it would probably be dominated by pharmaceutical companies.
And listen, anecdotally, I feel like the worlds can merge. I really do believe that, and we're behind that as a company, especially the responsible use in developing a microdose of truffles that are legal in the Netherlands. And Sarah, I'll go to you because with all your knowledge here in this space and in this sector, how important is it for true stigmas to end here and people being able to say, listen, microdosing is being done from Silicon Valley to Wall Street to your friends, who are your neighbors, maybe even your sister or your parents. And right now, really, people are microdosing responsibly on their own, but they're doing it illegally. So how important is it to maybe look at the rec side going, there's access to it anyway. There's very little government crackdowns. There's websites where people can buy this stuff. It's illegal. They get it shipped to their homes. So, is that just what sort of to allude to what James was saying? Is that one step in it to say, hey, we're here anyway. How do we all work together and collect data that benefits everybody?
Yeah, I think it's important both for individuals that, like myself, who are open about it and say these substances have helped me. They've increased my productivity, they've helped my healing, and they are incredibly widespread. I also think it's really important to look at data about substitutes, right? Like, is microdosing better than Adderall? Quite likely, when it comes to side effects and long-term antiplasticity that drugs like Adderall create, which are massively prescribed and used, and big pharma is making billions and billions of dollars out of. So I think like looking at what is actually going on can help us debias ourselves, and looking at potential of creating a harmony for our brain is incredibly important. Yeah.
Tyler, only because we have a few minutes here, and then I'll do a final sort of thank you to everyone and all the panelists and everyone for watching. We're so grateful for everybody's time here in the middle of the day. It's a beautiful day where I am, so it's tough sometimes to dedicate an hour in the day if it's so gorgeous outside. So we are thankful. But maybe if you could have a few kind of wrap-up moments here, a couple of things on your mind that might end this wonderful chat in a sort of a nice, unique way.
Putting some pressure on me here, Todd. I think there's just a really interesting note there. There's a lot of people using these substances recreationally, and many of them already have some sort of solutions that they're using, whether they're trying to integrate those experiences and they're documenting or journaling, or there's these fragmented tools and sort of systems that people are already using to make the most out of the psychedelic experiences that they're having. I think the part about the recreational piece is, I think there are many people have some support behind that, but we still have to be considerate of the risk of that, and especially if you're using any tools, for example, to document your psychedelic experiences and you're in a place where those are illegal activities, that's something that could actually be a little bit worrying. And of course, we're not seeing that much of a crackdown or anything like that, but in some places that can be. I would just like to, maybe one thing that I'm really focused on here in Canada, we have a decriminalize nature campaign going right now and a petition being signed, and it's going to be read in the House of Parliament. And, that's a huge step if Canada can make this happen and actually bring decriminalization to our country. So that's something that I'm very excited about. I just think in general, it's an honor to be here. I'm so excited to just, be part of this community and just be welcome with open arms. And I'm glad that we're capable of having discussions like this so openly and honestly as we all try to solve this together and make the world sort of a better, happier, and healthier place.
Tyler, the old radio's coming out of me right now. Where can people find you? Where can they access information on Twitter and your website, et cetera?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on there. I've got a website, speakai.co, and then sessions.ai, and then tylerbrydon.com. And I feel encouraged to send me a message. I love this stuff and love these conversations. This is makes my life so happy. So thank you.
Thank you, man. And great job today. James Stevens, where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, so I'm a big LinkedIn guy as well, too. I use it pretty extensively, do lots of open stuff, especially about my experiences with actually using non-psychedelic medicinal mushrooms on there from there. But it's james@aureliusdata.com. I also have my own kind of like product development and whatever companies from there. But LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me. That's where I'm the most active. And I welcome people to definitely reach out there. So, and I'm pretty easy to find if you do James Stevens and Aurelius or Iron Light or any other millions of things I've done. So.
Thank you. And Sarah Hashkes, Sarah, where can people get you?
Yeah, you're welcome to find me on LinkedIn or sarah.hashkes@radixmotion.com. Radix Motion has a Twitter, a Facebook, and we have a crowdfunding that opens to the public tomorrow on WeFunder. It's still open to everyone on this that's hearing this today. So if you want to get in before the public at better terms, basically today's the day. So feel free to contact me if you're interested.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Todd Shapiro, formerly worked in the radio and media biz for 20 years, and we've taken a company public called Red Light Holland, which is going to focus heavily as well on scientific and medical search, despite maybe the name being interesting for that angle. But trust me, we really want to be a part of making a difference and responsible use. We're trading on the CSE under TRIP, TRIP, and I'm so grateful to Deborah and the entire team at SciTech and our three panelists for this wonderful talk today. It's been brilliant, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow, thank you so much, everybody. I know Sarah said earlier we cannot let fear stop us, and I feel like listening to you guys, the leaders of the future of technology in this space, that I feel a little bit safer, and I know that the community really, really enjoyed listening to your knowledge. We enjoyed it, and we're really thrilled to have you, Todd, host this amazing panel. There was great feedback. I want to watch the recording so I can get all the bits I missed. And thank you, everyone from the community from SciTech. We'll see you at the next webinar, which will be on June 30th, where we'll be discussing the pathway from cannabis to psychedelics. And I think that that's going to be a really interesting discussion with a lot of opinions. Let's put it that way. So hope to see you all then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.